What happened after October the 7th is that Palestinians who had work permits
Right.
to find employment in Israel had those work permits rescinded. They were deemed illegal aliens in Israel, the Gazans at least, and
Mhm.
were incarcerated and beaten and tortured by all accounts. The issuance of work permits is used as a mechanism of pacification. What happens is if you stand to lose your work permit if you or any member of your extended family gets involved in, say, a political demonstration or gets arrested for throwing a rock at a soldier, you lose your permit like that. So it's a form of social control, the issuance of these permits, and that's why the military establishment in Israel really likes this program. The long-standing but recently deepening alliance between Hindutva, the reigning ideology of Hindu nationalism in India, and the doctrine of Jewish supremacy that lies at the heart of Zionism. So
Mm.
these two ideologies are very much ethno-nationalist cousins. And of course, it's only Hindus that will be coming to Israel.
Oh,
Israel does not want Muslims, does not want any more Muslims.
oh, okay.
And so this form of labor apartheid is being exported on this international basis now.
Assalamu alaikum. This is Amina from New Wave Global. I have with me today Professor Andrew Ross. Hi, Professor. Thank you for joining us today.
Well, I mean,
Professor Andrew Ross is a professor of social and cultural analysis at NYU. He's the author and editor of 25 books, including Stone Men, the Palestinian Who Built Israel, and is the secretary of the National Network of Faculty for Justice in Palestine. Under the radar, there has been this Indian-Israel migrant worker deal, which is slowly meant to replace the Palestinian task force. So what do you have to say about that? And it seems like that there has been an enhancement or a multiplication after the recent events. After, I mean, this deal was happening even prior, but after the conflict, it seems like it has logarithmically increased, and there is an urgency to bring in Indian workers to replace the Palestinian task force.
mhm, mhm. Well, I think it's a very interesting development. It has all sorts of geopolitical ramifications too. And you're right. There was a policy in place, much at a much more reduced scale prior to October the 7th. There were several thousand Indian nurses employed in Israel. And there was an embryonic plan to add construction workers. Um, what happened after October the 7th is that Palestinians who had work permits
Right.
to find employment in Israel had those work permits rescinded. They were deemed illegal aliens in Israel, the Gazans at least, and
Mhm.
were incarcerated and beaten and tortured by all accounts. In the West Bank, there is as many as 150,000 Palestinians with work permits and who work across the Green Line in Israel, but another 35,000 at least who work in settlements in the West Bank. So a huge number of the Palestinian population is dependent on the higher wages that can be gotten from working in Israel,
Mhm.
because the minimum wage in the West Bank and Gaza is set so low that it's not a survival wage at all.
Wow.
So people really have no alternative but to go and work for the occupier. And over the years, this has turned into a very finely honed system that works to the benefit of the occupier in all sorts of ways. The Palestinian workers are better, they're cheaper, they're more compliant than migrant workers. Uh, they don't um, they don't send their wages home like migrant workers. They take their wages and they pay Israeli prices for Israeli goods
Yeah.
in the West Bank. because Israeli goods saturate the markets. So it's a win-win for the Israeli economy.
Yeah.
And they go home every night. They don't make any social demands on the state. So there are a lot of advantages to employing Palestinian workers for Israeli employers, and Israeli employers recognize that they always prefer Palestinian workers. Plus, the other major advantage from the military or security perspective in Israel is that the issuance of work permits is used as a mechanism of pacification. What happens is if you stand to lose your work permit if you or any member of your extended family gets involved in, say, a political demonstration or gets arrested for throwing a rock at a soldier, you lose your permit like that. So it's a form of social control, the issuance of these permits, and that's why the military establishment in Israel really likes this program. After October 7th, Amina, what happened was all the work permits got revoked, and the far right wing in the Netanyahu coalition clamored to bring in a new source of migrant labor. And the Chinese, who had been sending construction workers, said, no, we're not going to send in. At this point in time, while Israel is committing genocide, very few countries in the traditional sending countries of the global South are going to step forward and risk condemnation for this. Only one country decided to do so, and that was Narendra Modi's India. That in over the last decade and a half or so has emerged as a very loyal friend and ally of Israel, overturning decades of sympathy for the Palestinian cause. There are a lot of reasons, I think, why Modi stepped forward to promise to deliver a workforce, and we're talking about very large numbers, from 50 to 100,000.
Yes.
And I think it's a very interesting development. It's exposed the long-standing but recently deepening alliance between Hindutva, the reigning ideology of Hindu nationalism in India, and the doctrine of Jewish supremacy that lies at the heart of Zionism. So these two ideologies are very much ethno-nationalist cousins, and increasingly Modi has recognized that, and that's one of the reasons why this allyship has strengthened and deepened in recent years. And of course, it's only Hindus that will be coming to Israel.
Oh.
Israel does not want Muslims, does not want any more Muslims.
Oh, okay.
And so this form of labor apartheid is being exported on this international basis now. That you won't find that written down anywhere, but everyone knows that only Hindus should or could apply for those jobs. So it's still a risky proposition for him to step forward and do this. But it seems to be proceeding, and the first Indian workers arrived in Israel in the last couple of weeks or so. One of the analogies, Amina, historically, although fairly recent history, is in the Gulf states, the Persian Gulf states. The migrant workforce used to be Palestinian in the 1950s and 60s. And when Palestinians became a sort of volatile political presence in the 1970s, they were replaced as the dominant workforce by South Asians from India and Pakistan and Bangladesh and Nepal, which is now the dominant workforce now in the Persian Gulf states. Are we going to see a similar substitution in Israel? of Indian workers for Palestinians? I think it's a question some people are asking. I doubt that it's very likely, for all sorts of reasons, primarily because Israeli employers have always preferred Palestinian workers, as I've said, and also because of that other reason that the military establishment in Israel is very wedded to using Palestinian employment as a mode of pacification. So I would be surprised if we see a very large-scale shift, but I do think we're going to see a lot of Indian workers coming in to replace the Chinese workers at the very least.
So I know you mentioned that a lot of sending countries, or the countries who usually send in construction workers and the likes to these places, did not want to risk condemnation from the rest of the world, while Israel, in this current situation where there's an ongoing genocide of Palestinians. But it seems like that we haven't seen any condemnation of the Indian authorities. Nobody has said a word. In fact, I'd be surprised if a lot of people even knew about this deal.
Well, there's been a lot of opposition within India.
Yeah.
I mean, it's difficult to express opposition within India because of the repression. But the civil servants have been trying to delay the progress of the agreement. The opposition party has been in opposition, and the major trade unions, the 10 major trade unions, issued a statement back in December condemning the agreement, not just because of the symbolism of supporting and sending workers in support of a country committing genocide, but also sending workers into a very unsafe situation. Not just because of the military confrontation, but also Israel's construction industry has very high levels of injury to workers because it's so labor intensive. And the workers that are being sent are not being given any of the customary guarantees regarding insurance and employment protection that is typically offered by the Indian government to migrant workers going to the Gulf.
So despite the fact that there are no safeguards in place, this huge exodus of Indian workers to Israel is still happening. Thank you, Professor, for bringing the current situation and putting it in a perspective and helping us understand how the global view around the conflict is evolving. It was very helpful.
You're welcome. It's been a pleasure. I mean, I thank you for having me on your show.
And I think it would be amiss of me not to mention that you're in Shanghai and we have a 12-hour time difference, and you were still able to contribute to this. So thank you again.
Thank you.